Hey everyone, Don Lemon has gone from annoying former CNN anchor to hero of the First Amendment. I'm Rich Lowry of National Review. Of course, this has to do with the indictment of Don Lemon for his part in the mob action at City's Church in Minneapolis. Now, I'm not going to go through Zapruder tape style of all the footage we saw from Lemon himself that might incriminate him. Others have done a very good job of that already. But I want to make one general point about Lemon's journalism and then get to a core misunderstanding of the First Amendment that is the foundation of a lot of the defense of Don Lemon in this matter. First of all, regarding his journalism, it's just extraordinary to think that just a few years ago, we were supposed to believe that the likes of Don Lemon and Jim Acosta were the straight down the middle newsmen at this establishment news network, CNN. It was obviously false at the time, but as soon as they were out the door, the disguise totally came off, and they both exposed themselves as hack left-wing activists. Here is Lemon telling an anti-ICE agitator that he shouldn't be hostile to him because Lemon is on his side.
What's that going to mean?
This is a white supremacist agenda.
Why do you say that? No, me, dude. I'm
You're
not
on
here.
team? Whose team are you on?
Come on, man.
Don Lemon.
This is Don Lemon.
All right, man.
All right. Well, no.
Sorry, brother. I'm so sorry.
Very much
really?
on our team.
No, I'm so sorry.
He's on our team.
Yeah. So why do you say that?
Sorry, one other point about Lemon and his journalism. So he's covering these moronic, thuggish clowns about to invade a church, and he apparently considers himself like Edward R. Murrow covering the Blitz.
I'm standing on a rooftop looking out over London. At the moment, everything is quiet. For reasons of national as well as personal security, I am unable to tell you the exact location from which I'm speaking.
Now, with regard to the First Amendment, something at play here is a lot of people consider it a kind of get out of jail free card. They think because you're a member of the press, you have more rights and special press rights. It gives you prerogatives not available to other people. And that is completely wrong. The constitutional lawyer Casey Maddox had a great post on this. He wrote, "There's no special status of First Amendment protection for journalists as a class that other Americans don't get. It is important that journalists understand this and consider that fact whenever they would be tempted to argue against others' First Amendment rights." The freedom of the press in the First Amendment refers to the dissemination of views. It's not meant to give the press, in the sense we understand it, some special status. It wasn't talking about an industry and people who go to journalism school working for big journalistic organizations. No, Antonin Scalia, predictably, was good on this. The journalist Marvin Kalb asked Scalia, explain why in the First Amendment, after listing the phrase freedom of speech, the Founding Fathers found it necessary or wanted to add four crucially important words, or of the press. Freedom of the press is what they were talking about, but why do they add that phrase? Why was it necessary, Justice Scalia? Scalia, I think it's a natural addition. All it means is the freedom to speak and to write. It wasn't referring to the institutional press, the guys that run around with a fedora hat with a sticker in it that says press. That was, I'm not sure that they even referred to the institutional press in those days. It means the freedom to speak and to publish, and that clause has been interpreted not to give any prerogatives to the institutional press. It gives prerogatives to anybody who has a Xerox machine. The scholar Eugene Volokh has delved in depth into this question. In a law review article, he set out the different views of the First Amendment. One is that the freedom of the press specially protects the press as an industry. The other is that freedom of the press does not protect the press as an industry, but rather protects everyone's use of the printing press and its modern equivalents as a technology. Volokh, after carefully reviewing the evidence, writes, any calls for specially protecting the press as industry have to look to sources other than the text, original meaning, tradition, and precedent for support. So freedom of the press, what are we talking about? We're talking about the printing press. We're talking about what Gutenberg invented. Hugely important. It was a signal event in the history of North America when the first printing press got here in 1639. What was Benjamin Franklin? He was a guy with a printing press. He wasn't a member of the media in the way we understand it today. Now, this way of thinking about freedom of the press actually helps Don Lemon in one sense, right? Because he used to be a member of the media industrial complex. He had a primetime show where he could sit behind that desk at CNN. Now he's just a guy with a little mic wandering around among his allies in Minneapolis. But he's equally a journalist either way. It's just that his First Amendment rights don't trump anyone else's. And he himself has a desperately erroneous view of what the First Amendment is. Here he is at that church that morning.
All these comfortable white people. Hey, you are a fake Christian.
This is what the First Amendment is about.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. That is what the violation of First Amendment rights looks like. The free speech organization FIRE had a great take on this. Right after this incident, FIRE wrote, "There's no First Amendment right to enter a house of worship and engage in conduct that effectively shuts down a religious service, even as part of a protest, nor does anybody have the right to remain on private property after being asked by its owner or authorized representatives to leave. The First Amendment offers the strongest protection of speech in traditional public forums, streets, sidewalks, parks, while also protecting freedom of association, religious exercise, and freedom of conscience. A society committed to free expression depends not only on protecting speech, but on maintaining a clear delineation between protected speech on the one hand and unprotected civil or criminal conduct on the other. A worship service held inside a church is not a public forum. It is a private religious gathering, typically held on private property, convened for a specific and constitutionally protected purpose, religious exercise." Now, what Lemon in effect did was say, I have First Amendment rights because I'm a journalist, and all these people I'm allied with, these agitators and activists, they have First Amendment rights because they're protesters, and we're going to go violate the First Amendment rights of other people because everyone in that church that morning had a First Amendment right to worship their God as they pleased without disruption. And it was incredibly stupid and arrogant of Lemon not to realize that what they're about to do was inherently wrong and might be a violation of federal law in the form of the FACE Act. So his defense here can't just be, oh, I'm a journalist. If you're a journalist and you conspire with the mafia or with the domestic terror group, that's not enough to get you off the hook. His defense has to be, I didn't do it. I didn't conspire with these people. I didn't obstruct the church service myself. I was just there covering it. Now, there are obviously going to be some major factual difficulties for him making that case. But if he did the crime, it isn't enough or shouldn't be enough just to play the freedom of press card. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.